And now here's cartoonist Len Norris. Although he was born in Britain 75 years ago and lived for a time in Ontario before being conned into coming out west, there was no one more immediately identifiable with BC and especially Vancouver than cartoonist Len Norris. Through his wild assortment of characters, both myth and real, Norris has become a habit to anyone who ever opened the Vancouver Sun. With ink and pen, Norris captured the character of our town and ourselves. He picked on everybody, the police, customs, kids, the CBC, the arts community, UBC, politicians, but especially the inhabitants of West Vancouver.
Yeah, this was a quaint place compared to sort of dull, gray old Toronto, and we went over to the North Shore, which in those days, 1950, was just beyond the stage of being a summer cottage place. Yeah, it was quaint. There were no sidewalks. It was a little tiny town. West Van lent itself to setting scenes for these things. The scenery there and the atmosphere was sort of West Coast to me. And Victoria, we had a big circulation in Victoria then, so I could bring in that area and the Empress and all those quaint type of people and illustrate it rather than caricature the Ottawa and Victoria as lawmakers and as politicians. I set up the scene with the Phelps family and the kids.
Yes.
And that gets us back to the kids because then you can relate to those.
They all seem like little brats. You know, you really did pick a wacky province to come to. I mean, this place is loaded with loonies.
I was sheer luck. I was most fortunate because it fitted all my ideas that I finally, they weren't preconceived, but they were finally conceived on how I could manage this job.
And the politics of this province,
wonderful.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's wonderful. We had some wonderful people. They could maybe ruin the country, but they're great for us, you know.
Do you have one favorite?
I have a couple that I like, but unfortunately most other people don't like them. I only like them because of the way they turned out, their drawing.
Tell us about those two.
Well, there's one of the chap standing at the window in his pajamas looking out in the middle of the night, and his wife is saying something about, I don't think you should expect great results from the Western economic provincial premier's meeting overnight. And he's been standing looking out the window waiting for something to happen. Another one is a guy and just dropped his income tax in the mailbox and his arm is stuck. And the fire department, the police are all there, and he said he had just posted his income tax and the paper boy came, and the MPs on the paper said they had just given themselves a big raise, and he is trying to get his income tax back. I don't offend too many people, and this is a sin really in my business. I think the thing to do is to really hammer these guys, you know, and the nature of my approach doesn't do that, doesn't lend itself particularly to that.
So what is the key to success then? Why did you strike these chords?
I think part of it is not being too much of an expert on free trade and so on, and on the science and the specifics of it. I'm no smarter than the next guy who reads the paper and ends up saying, I don't know.
I don't understand.
I don't understand it.
Would you change anything, do over to have it do over again?
No, I haven't thoroughly, well, I still am thoroughly enjoying this business and my job and everything else. I intended to become the great architect like Frank Lloyd Wright, and this was a lot more fun.
Hugh Pickett, Vancouver's impresario, also known as Mr. Show Business and Friend to the Stars. Since the 1940s, he's been a fixture on the city's entertainment scene, bringing to town almost all the show folk worth seeing. Over the years, many of these people have become his close friends and keep in touch on a regular basis. Down at the Orpheum Theatre last week, I asked Hugh if he got into the business for the love or the money.
A lot of people have gone bankrupt in this town because they were fascinated by show business. You can't make money. You've got to work 24 hours a day. You've got to love it. You've got to have another reason for doing it other than money.
And some years you made absolutely nothing, and other years you made a lot of money.
Well, one year I remember we did have $1 million in the bank, and the next year we were in trouble and had to go and ask the bank to loan us money. But that's what it went from 1949 right up to into 81, really.
Why did you decide to become an impresario, or
well,
did you decide that?
Decide. I was after the war, and I was really not in the war. I was in the Army. There's a difference. I was a secretary to a brigadier in the old Vancouver Hotel here for 4 years, and at the end of the war, I went to Los Angeles in 1946. I was there for 6 months, and Holly Maxwell, who worked for Gordon Hilker, phoned and said, why don't you come up here? You always wanted to be in the business and be our press agent for Theater Under the Stars. Well, I didn't even know what a press agent was, but I came. And with the help of the media, who were wonderful to me, the 2 newspapers and the radio stations, it was before television, I got along with that. I did that for 15 years. Then Gordon Hilker left Vancouver for Toronto, and Holly and I took over the business and ran it for 35 years.
Now, this theater celebrated its 60th birthday just a few months ago, and I understand you were in the lineup for the opening of this theater in
1927 on the Seymour Street entrance, which no longer exists. I went to everything as a kid. You could do anything. I'd do anything for you if you gave me a dime to go to the movies. I lived in the movies. In those days, you could go to the Capitol Theater at 11 o'clock for 10 cents and stay there all day. They didn't throw you out.
You liked it so much you got a job as an usher.
Yeah, the Colonial. Loved every minute of it. And while I was there, I was 15 years old. It was in the summer from high school. They ran a film called The Blue Angel, which would have run at the Capitol Theater, only it was cut to pieces. There was about a half an hour cut out of it, because in those days, it was illegal to show the inside of a woman's thigh. And Marlene Dietrich was one of the stars, and I fell in love with Marlene. Little did I know that many years later, I would be broke traveling with her.
And you worked with her for years as a friend.
10 years I did all her business, because I saved her 30% paying an agent. And we became good friends through Sir John Gielgud, and her husband and I were friends. And she's in Paris, and we talk on the phone. But I certainly never thought that would happen from the Colonial Theater days.
Who are your best friends these days in showbiz?
Well, the people that I'm in touch with all the time are Mitzi, of course. I stay at Mitzi's house when I'm in Los Angeles, and she's coming up here for this roast they're doing at the Arts Club. And Kate Hepburn and Lillian Gish. We talk on the phone all the time.
You're never going to retire, are you?
Well, I'm not going to stop doing things. I got out of the business, which is wonderful. You don't have to worry anymore.
You've probably been asked this a million times, but is there any particular highlight in your career that comes to mind?
Well, I'll tell you, it sounds absolutely imbecilic, but one of the things that I'll never forget, which made me feel better than anything else ever did, it was a high without the aid of anything else, was when Katherine Hepburn said, "Oh, for Christ's sake, call me Kate." You know, that voice. And I was never so flattered in my life.
He's been up and he's been down. A millionaire one day, flat busted the next. Mr. Vancouver, also known as Frank Baker, restaurateur, ladies' man, musician, has always known how to blow his own horn. A fanatic collector, he at one time owned the original James Bond Aston Martin. He's been an alderman and once ran for mayor of Vancouver. Life in the fast lane led to a drinking problem, which eventually resulted in his losing everything. But now he's on the way back up.
I was an introvert when I was young.
You were?
Mm-hmm.
I'm shocked.
That's true. And in order to defend myself against all of the little kids that were beating the heck out of me, I had to pretend I was an extrovert. Now, this is not something you really plan, but it was a sort of a defense mechanism, and all of a sudden I found myself, if not an extrovert, acting like one. So that everything in life from a certain period on, I was trying to do differently than anybody else, with a little twist, something different that people would remember Frank Baker because he was different. I was brought up and trained to be a minister of the gospel, almost ordained when my father was taken away from me at an early age, and a very early age in his case, 42, and I decided that if God was going to be that kind of a guy, I didn't need him, so I rejected him right up until 3.5 years ago, when I found him again.
Frank, where did you learn to play the trumpet?
In the Foursquare Gospel Church, when I was 7 years of age. Amy Semple McPherson, the evangelist of her time, the first female evangelist, lady evangelist, and became a worldwide known person. And as I mentioned, I went to her Bible college with a view because my father wanted me to be a trumpet-playing evangelist. Now, I didn't realize until very recently how dangerous it would have been to be an evangelist named Baker.
Did your father tell you that he had a life and religion plan for you?
Well, yes. He gave me my first white suit and baton when I was 18 years of age, and I took over the leadership of the 40-piece marching band of the Foursquare Gospel Church. And that's when I first started wearing white suits. And Colonel Saunders had carried on the tradition since, and now that he's gone, I'm trying to carry on his tradition with a little goatee, which has certainly improved the sale of Southern Fried Chicken at this restaurant.
I loved it. So he copied you. Colonel Saunders copied you, right?
Well, I used to kid him about that. I used to tell the Colonel, I said, Colonel, if you had my recipe for chicken, you'd be a general.
How did you make all that money, Frank, and how did you lose it?
I was fortunate enough to be a partner of Frank Bernard, one of the smartest businessmen that I ever ran into. And he and I started with the Georgian Towers Hotel, and then we took over the Park Royal Hotel, and then we took over the Capilano Gardens, and then we separated our interests, and he took the 2 hotels, and I took the Capilano Gardens, changed them to the Frank Bakers, expanded, built the attic, and in those days, we could not expand the business fast enough. Well, if that's the case, if people want to come and come and come again, then you can't help but make money. And money was never important to me. It was just, so many people sort of cornily say, but it's true. It's a method of keeping score. But I had an accountant who told me that go ahead and spend it as fast as you can, Frank. You're making it faster and it'll go on forever. And that was the worst advice I had ever received. So with a combination of spending too much, not watching the business, and drinking too much, we ended up bankrupt. Isn't it amazing that coming from 5 years ago, Dorothy and I showed you a picture up there, we're on welfare, literally on welfare. And 5 years later, at this very moment that you and I are talking, or as we talk, I am negotiating the takeover of another restaurant, and I can tell you which one it is. It's the Quarry House restaurant at the top of Little Mountain, which will be the peak of our restaurant career.
Isn't
Now,
that
do you
fabulous?
think that I don't have an awful lot to thank God for? Do you think, talking about Vancouver being a small town, have you seen the city from the top of Little Mountain?
Mm-hmm.
Does that look like a small town to you? This is the greatest spot in this whole wide world.
So you've still got another project. You're not finished.
Heavens, no. I'm just starting. Just starting.